The very first microaggression that came to mind was tardiness. I really don't like that word. I'd rather say just late because it reminds me of school. Because when you were late at school, they said you were tardy. But tardiness is a microaggression. Let's call it a slight or an offense that sometimes people with autism have to endure because people don't take it seriously. Now, I got to tell you, as I was putting together this list, I came up with 11 things, 11 microaggressions, or we could call them offenses or slights or acts of disrespect that sometimes we don't quite understand, so we have to come to grips with it. But as I got to number 11, it occurred to me that, I'm guilty of all 11 of these myself. So I thought, the way we need to approach this is not just to ask ourselves the question, how do we respond when other people do it to us, when other people disrespect us? But how do we, guard ourselves from offending others? Because one thing that Aspies do very good, people with autism or people with autistic tendencies, is we unnecessarily offend people. We don't know we're doing it. So let's look at both sides of this. Not only people do it to us, but sometimes we need to be careful because we're doing it to others. So when we talk about a microaggression, we're talking about a dog whistle. You've heard that term before. But they are, every day, we would call them slights or maybe putdowns, insults. But my favorite word, or favorite synonym, I should say, is invalidation. Little things people do that are offensive. And a lot of times they don't even know they're doing it. I know when I do these things, a lot of times I don't know until after, and then I have to go apologize to somebody. And a lot of times we are well-intended. And a lot of times what's more is the offense, the microaggression, is really not an aggression at all. It's not an offense at all. It's just that the person is sensitive. A lot of times I'm sensitive to offenses. And there was no offense. The problem is with the recipient of the offense. So let's keep those things in mind. All right. So we have two kinds of biases. There is implicit bias and there is explicit bias. Explicit bias, kind of obvious. That's when somebody will intentionally, willfully offend us, and they know what they're doing. They do it on purpose. They do it by design. Implicit bias, rather, as you may have already guessed, is when they don't intend to do it. But still, it's very hurtful. But number one is just tardiness. Have you ever been expecting somebody to pick you up, say, at an airport or, at school, and they're too busy to get you on time? They got other things to do, which I guess is okay if they really do. But sometimes they don't. They just don't care. That is an implicit bias. That's a microaggression oftentimes. Now, if they do it intentionally, then it's an explicit bias. But a lot of times, they're just not thinking, or they just don't care. So they're slighting us. They're offending us. And again, we do it to other people. Sometimes we need to be conscious of that. We need to be aware of it. And the way to counter this, and I think this is true probably of all 11 of these, is to communicate verbally. In other words, tell them. There is another problem. And that is the people with autism, people who have autistic tendencies, we're not really good at confrontation. We're not really good at communication. And so saying, hey, I'd appreciate it if you would not do this to me. But you may have to do it. The tendency for me is to pay him back. You offended me, I'm going to offend you. There, that'll show you. And the problem with that is they may not know they offended you. And they think that you're just being a jerk for no reason whatsoever. But if you communicate directly, maybe you can joke about it. Like, hey, thanks for being late. I'm in no big hurry. and maybe you can make a joke out of it. Maybe not. You've got to explore the circumstances as they happen. Number 2 is blame shifting. A lot of people do this. Again, it's unconscious. Not always, but sometimes it is. Because we just naturally don't like to take blame for things. And sometimes we just say, I didn't do it. Well, maybe we didn't do it, but chances are we did, and we just don't want to take blame for it. And our natural response is, nah, I didn't do it. Well, if you didn't do it, who did? Now think of the person who's blaming you. They're thinking the same thing. They're thinking, I don't want to take blame for this, so I'm going to say I didn't do it. And a lot of times, there's only one other person that could be blamed. And so it falls to you by default. It's an implicit bias. It's a dog whistle. It's a microaggression. They're just trying to get out of the blame for whatever they do. So they unintentionally blame you, or maybe they do it intentionally, but it just comes so automatic that it's kind of intentional, unintentional. You have probably experienced this at work because people are always making mistakes at work. Somebody does that to you, again, you've got to, I can't think of an exception to this, but you got to stand up for yourself. And sometimes you got to go directly to the person in charge and say, hey, I didn't do this. Not trying to blame this other guy, or maybe you are. But let the supervisor know, possibly, but certainly let the guy who's blame shifting know. And typically, if somebody blame shifts, they're going to keep on doing it. So when you confront them, they're going to argue with you. That's okay. The point is, you let them know that you know. And if they argue with you, you've done what you need to do, so let them argue. Number 3 is making you the butt of a joke. A lot of times. Now, sometimes we do this playfully. We don't mean to offend people, and they're okay with it. Sometimes people tease me and pick on me, but we're having fun. They don't mean to hurt, but sometimes they do. When I was a pastor of a church, I had a staff member, and one of the jokes, it's kind of silly, but one of the jokes he liked to do was fake my signature. And he would do it by drawing a straight line, because that's pretty much what my signature looks like. It looks like a straight line. He was being funny, and to me that was not offensive in any way whatsoever. But then again, when I was in college, I used to sing a lot. Somewhere on the internet, I've got some of my singing. I can't sing now. I can't really talk. But I traveled with this guy. He was a college student. He was an itinerant preacher. They call themselves evangelists, but itinerant preacher. And wherever we would go, I was the butt of the joke. He wanted to make people laugh. He wanted to be friendly. He wanted people to like him. And for some reason, the way he did that was to make me the butt of the joke. Now, he only did it when other people were around. And was that an implicit bias or explicit? Well, that's somewhere in the middle. That was in that gray area. That was in the flux, so to speak. But I think it was kind of implicit. And what I did is I just confronted him. And I said, knock it off. It's not funny. This is hurtful. It's demeaning. And his response was, number 1, he knocked it off. He stopped doing it. But then he started finding fault with things that I did, which were kind of silly. But blame shifting and butt of the joke combined all at once. Number 4, this is one that bothers me for some reason. This bothers me than all the others. And that is just being dismissive. Not taking me seriously. And I do the same thing. I don't take other people seriously. Well, in one sense, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and we can say, I care about all 8 billion people, but I can't take care of all of them. So in that sense, we're kind of being dismissive. Well, how close do these people have to be to you before being dismissive is, really offensive. It's something that you should not do. I told the story a couple of days ago about the football coach who wanted me to play football even though I had a migraine headache and I was about to die. I mean, he had no idea the pain I was in, and I was sick. And he said, a little headache's not going to hurt you. That's being dismissive. And that was a microaggression because, well, he didn't have a point of reference. He didn't know how sick I really was. He just didn't know. Now, I could have told him, hey, I am really, really sick, and he still would not have gotten it. Now, if I'd thrown up, pardon me for being gross, but if I'd thrown up, okay, then he would have gotten it. And I have noticed, gentlemen, please take no offense, but I have noticed that women seem to be a little more sensitive. They seem to be able to detect when somebody else is not feeling well, or is sick, or is offended. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's the maternal instinct, but I think maybe that's why women do very well as nurses. Well, most of them do. I've had a few nurses that were flat out jerks, but 99.9% of them, they just have a knack for it. They do very well as teachers. Again, I think it's that maternal instinct. So maybe, not maybe, I remember in high school, might have even been the same year, I had a migraine headache, came over me in the cafeteria, and one of the female teachers came up to me and said, you need to go to the nurse. So the male coach didn't pick up on it, but the female teacher picked up on it immediately. And good thing I got to the nurse just in time to make a big mess for them to clean up. But people are dismissive. They don't understand how much it hurts. And you try to tell them how much it hurts. There was a person who hurt my parents. I had no idea. I mean, I knew this person and they never hurt me, so I was just kind of dismissive. I thought, well, they're overreacting. Until that person did hurt me, and then I got the point of reference. Now I understand what they were going through. I can't apologize to them because they're gone. But I wish I could, because now I know. But the point is, a lot of times people will be dismissive and it hurts, but we need to understand it's a microaggression. Sometimes they know they're doing it. Okay, it's a macroaggression. It's implicit or explicit, rather, bias. But a lot of times it's just not. And no matter how much you tell them, they're not going to get it until they go through it themselves. Number 5 is pressure. Pressure to say things, pressure to do things, pressure to be somewhere. You don't want to do it. You want to go there. You don't want to say it. You don't want to participate. Now, when you are a teenager, and I assume we have some adolescents who are tuning in here, we all go through peer pressure. And you never outgrow it. It just becomes less severe as you get older. That's the whole point of the hive mind. That peer pressure is always there, sucking you in, holding you fast like a vacuum. And there's pressure to do things and say things that otherwise you would not. That's a microaggression. And I think one of the most frustrating microaggressions that I've ever experienced, talk about pressure, is that backseat driver. That guy who's trying to help you drive. All right, life is a drive, and we have these people who sit in the seat next to us through life, using an analogy here, and they're always telling us how to do things, putting pressure on us. That's just an annoyance. That's a different version of what we're talking about. But that pressure to do something that you really don't want to do, there's an antidote to that. You say no. And, I know some people with autism, people who are autistic is the way I should be saying this, they have a difficult time saying no. And a lot of times they don't say yes, they just do it. They don't say, they're not given a choice. And if somebody doesn't give you a choice, there's a couple reasons. Number 1, it's the IRS. Or number 2, it's your employer. If you're in the military, it could be your superior. Somebody who is in a position of authority You don't have a choice. You know, you could take a choice, but you may get a ticket. So I am under pressure. Let's go back to the driving analogy. I am under pressure to drive the speed limit. And if I don't do it, I could suffer consequences. But outside of that, when people try to impose their law on you, let's say you have a friend, let's use a benign name like John Doe. Well, John Doe has John Doe's law. And he expects you, or Jane Doe, he or she expects you to do as they please, as they wish. There's another name for that. I think it's just being obnoxious, being controlling, being narcissistic, but they put pressure on you to do things you don't want. And the only way I know around this, and maybe you have some ideas that I don't know, is just flat out refuse. Say, no, I'm not going to do it. And again, if it's a police officer, that's different. But we're not talking about authority figures. We're talking about, I really hate to keep using the term jerk over and over and over again, but it is so appropriate. Jerks. Number 6 is a microaggression is when people are overreaching. Yep, I got to admit, I'm guilty of this too. People are kind to you and you take advantage of them. And you may not even know you're doing it. They may not know you're doing it to them. Maybe you have somebody over to your house for dinner. Maybe you have an activity with someone else, whatever it is. And they're overreaching. You're having a conversation. And they won't quit talking. They won't give you a chance to speak. Now, if you're a person with autism, that probably doesn't bother you too much. It doesn't bother me a whole lot. But yeah, sometimes I'd like to have the consideration of knowing that my point of view and what I have to say is as important as what they have to say. And they don't get it. I've had conversations with people, good friends, dear friends, beloved friends. They don't let me talk. And it's not because I'm autistic, it's just their personality. That is a microaggression. They don't know they're doing it. They do it to everybody. It's not a personal thing. So number 6 is being overreaching, taking advantage of somebody. And just say this in passing, be careful who you loan money to because they'll come back and ask for more sometimes. And again, they think it's perfectly okay because you gave them permission the first time. Be really careful with that. Number 7 is microaggression is distraction. You ever been talking to somebody and their cell phone rings? I remember one time, this has been years ago, but had a good friend said, hey, meet me for lunch. All right, meet you for lunch. And I drove 35 miles to meet this guy for lunch. So we were having lunch, nice conversation, and his phone rang. I took all the time and effort to meet this guy. And he's talking not to me, but somebody who didn't take time at all to meet with him. All right, well, the phone call ended, and so we went back to our conversation, and guess what? Phone rang again. Here's something that we need to do, and that is turn our cell phones off because they're distractions. You're trying to talk to somebody and they're watching television. Okay, I plead guilty to that, and I've had to learn with my wife when I hear noise coming out of her mouth. I stop and listen. I don't always understand her, but it's my hearing starting to go wrong. But I get so distracted by what I'm doing, and that may be an autistic trait, and maybe it's just a me trait. I don't know. But my mind gets so involved in whatever I'm doing, self-talk, that when somebody else talks, I don't even hear them sometimes. I mean, you hear them audibly, but you're so engrossed in what you're thinking about that it may as well be silent. So, when somebody talks, stop and listen. Depending on who it is, obviously. So number 7 is microaggression is distraction. Number 8 I came up with is microaggression is inaction. Okay, once again, 8 billion people on the planet. You can't help all of them. Right? But there are some people who need your help. And sometimes, other side of the coin, we need the help of other people. And they won't help us. They could, they just don't because, well, they're inconsiderate. And again, a lot of times they don't even know it. They're just not thinking about it. They just don't help. I hate to keep talking about having dinner because, I'm trying to lose weight. Well, trying to keep the weight off, I should say. But have you ever had dinner with somebody at their house and they forget something like a napkin? What do? You don't want to ask them because that's impolite. They may not even have any napkins. Maybe they don't use napkins. I don't know. Maybe it's normal for them. But that's an inaction. That's a microaggression. I hate to overlook that one, but sometimes you have no choice. But you could think of a dozen of these where people could and should act. And again, we're as guilty as they are. We just a little more sensitive because we are people of autism. I just made up a new term. Number 9 is this: deception by omission. We're talking about deception. The people will tell us something and they'll leave out something intentionally. So they will deceive us. So we will have a thought or draw a conclusion that is inaccurate. That is a microaggression if they do it unintentionally. But typically, and sometimes we do, we leave things out all the time. More often that is a macroaggression. That is by design, but sometimes it isn't. We need to be aware of it. And the thing that we need to keep in mind as people who are autistic is we need to, I hate to say this because it pains me to say it, but we need to stop wearing our feelings on our sleeves. Which is an odd expression. I don't even know where that came from, but I've heard it my entire life. But it means to be hypersensitive. That seems, and the reason I say that is that's my problem. So I'm assuming that other people who have autism, who are autistic, have the same problem. Just hypersensitive. And that's, by the way, the reason we're even talking about these. Number 10 is to devalue your relationship. That is a microaggression that can be very, very hurtful. Okay, now this is not one of those, well, it could be, where we are hypersensitive or oversensitive. But when you have a relationship with somebody, and it could be a romance, could be a bromance, could just be a friend, neighbor, guy at church, whatever, somebody at school you've got this relationship going with, and you just quit paying attention to them. And I got to tell you, man, I've been guilty of that so many times because, I just lack that type of empathy. Now, I recognize it in hindsight a lot of times. I had friends when I was a kid. Didn't have a lot of them, but I had a couple of friends when I was a kid. And, you get older, you just drift away. Shouldn't do that. They were good friends. They were good buddies. And don't have a lot of them if you're autistic. But I would just kind of drift away. That's a microaggression. And people have done that to me too, And I recall, another example comes to mind. A lot of these things when I was a teenager, for some reason they're embedded in my mind. My first job, I worked at a grocery store, 16 years old. And I made some friends. Weren't close friends, but, we'd hang out together. And sometimes after work, we'd go out and goof off, teenagers. Usually we'd go to, there's a place called Burger Chef in our city that's since gone bust. It's kind of like McDonald's. And we'd go there and drive around in circles. Or we'd go in and act like idiots. But then I quit my job. And I lost all those friends. They didn't want to hang out with me anymore. There was something about the camaraderie of working at that grocery store that was the bonding factor, the glue that held us together. So there was a microaggression. I don't think they were trying to hurt me. I just wasn't part of the group anymore. And for a person who is autistic, being a part of a group, even if it's people you work with, that's really, really, really important. And number 11 is kind of the same thing, but I phrased it a little bit differently. And that is exclusion. When you're just not excluded. People at the table are talking. People in the classroom before, after class, hopefully are talking. People at the family gathering are talking. And you're just left out of the conversation. And you try to participate, and they just ignore you. That is a microaggression. Again, I think they do it naturally. At least with me, I don't know about you, they do it naturally because they just sense, that uncanny valley phenomenon we talked about in the last video and in other videos. They sense this guy's kind of odd. I've had conversations with people, and I'm not a good conversationalist, but I've had conversations with people, and a third person would come up, join the conversation, and suddenly the two of them are talking, and I'm not. Have you experienced that? The lesson to learn, and I don't know how to resolve that, because you try to butt back in the conversation, and they just ignore you. But the lesson to learn from that is, I wonder if I do that. And I think maybe I do, but because I don't have many conversations, I have to pay a little bit more attention. Did you get something out of this video? Some insights, maybe stirred up some thinking in your mind, maybe helped you a little bit? Well, if you're not a subscriber, why don't you join our family? Hit the little subscribe button. Then there's a bell. You click the bell, and as you know, when you click the bell, that tells YouTube that you want to be notified when we upload new videos, and that helps us a lot. And if you like the content, that'll help you a lot. Give us a like, thumbs up, if you think we deserve it, and if you have something to say, hopefully you do. Hopefully I stirred up enough thinking in your mind that you can leave a comment. And leave a comment in the comment section, and I always read them because we're small enough that we can do that. Sharing this video on Twitter, or X as they call it now, or other social media, Facebook, helps. If you think it'll be beneficial to others. And if you know other people who are autistic, just clue them in.
Last night as I lay sleeping, there came a dream so fair. I stood in old Jerusalem, beside the temple there. I heard the children singing, and ever as they sang, methought the voice of angels from heaven in answer rang. Methought the voice of angels from heaven in answer rang. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, lift up your gates and sing, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to your King. And then methought my dream was changed. The streets no longer rang. Hushed were the glad hosannas the little children sang. The sun grew dark with mystery. The morn was cold and chill, as the shadow of a cross arose upon a lonely hill. As the shadow of a cross arose upon a lonely hill. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I call the angels sing, Hosanna in the highest. scene was changed. New earth there seemed to be. I saw the holy city beside the tideless sea. The light of God was on its streets. The gates were open wide, and all who would might enter in, and no one was denied. No need of moon nor stars by night, nor sun to shine by day. It was the new Jerusalem that would not pass away. It was the new Jerusalem that would not pass away. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, sing for the night is o'er. Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna forevermore. Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna Morning sun, light of creation, grassy fields, a velvet flow, silver clouds, assuring curtain. Yes, he's designed a perfect world. I'm amazed at his talents. I stand in awe of one so great. Now my soul begins to sing out to the source from which it came. Bless the Lord who reigns in beauty. Bless the Lord who reigns with wisdom and with power. Bless the Lord who reigns my life with all his love. He has made a perfect heart. Bless the Lord who reigns in beauty. Bless the Lord who reigns with wisdom and with power. Bless the Lord who reigns my life with so much love. He can make a perfect heart. Bless the Lord who reigns in beauty. Bless the Lord who reigns with wisdom and with power. Bless the Lord, who reigns my life with so